We're live.
All right, welcome back, everybody, to House Energy and Digital Infrastructure. It is Thursday, January 29th, and we are here with the Department of Public Service to talk about their FY27 budget, the numbers that are in the governor's recommend, and also to hear about some legislative asks that they have of our committee. So we'll just go around and introduce ourselves and then turn it over. So I'm Representative Kathleen James from Manchester.
Chris Morrow, Windsor, Bennington.
Michael Southworth, Caledonia 2.
Christopher Howland, Rutland 4.
Territory, Washington 2.
Graham Putner, Chittenden 13, Burlington.
We're civilian.
Great. For the record.
Great. Brittany Wilson, Deputy Commissioner.
Hunter Thompson, Director of Telecommunications.
TJ Poor, Director of Regulated Utility Planning.
Excellent. All right. Well, thanks for being here. So I know you have some written testimony and we are all ears.
Great. Well, thank you for having us in. As the chair mentioned, we had some technical corrections / housekeeping requests, maybe minor policy, but they're not large policy asks that we wanted to ask of the committee. These requests currently do not have a home in the bills and we're looking to move them forward. So there's some of those asks and then just a couple of items on the fiscal 27 budget. So as you all have in front of you, this is an outline of what we're hoping to talk about today. I'll start off with the fiscal 27 budget. Not a whole lot here. As most of you probably know, the department is gross receipt tax funded, and our operating budget operating within our means and the revenue that we collect. But a couple of things to point out. One that's big for the department is we've got a conversion, one limited service position to a permanent position. That's a fairly sizable budgetary ask. That position is technically the financial director but it'll be the position that oversees our administrative services division. And it's limited service. We're looking to make that permanent. So wanted to call that out for the committee. That's a need for us.
I have a couple questions.
Yeah, my question was going to be to you, Madam Chair. Do you want us to ask questions as we're going along?
I think we should, because we're going to be switching topics.
We're done.
I have the feeling in a pretty defined way as we move through. So to stick on the budget, I am not sure we've ever talked to you guys about how you're funded, unless I've forgotten from last year. And the House Appropriations Committee is kind of developing, they've got a different approach to the budget process this year. And so they want to make sure that they're really doing our due diligence and that we understand kind of the ins and outs for the departments that are in our oversight capability. So can you I actually did not know that. And I wondered if you could just talk a little bit about how the department is funded.
Sure. So as I mentioned, primarily gross receipts tax. So that's on the income collected from utilities. We have roughly a $12 million operating budget. And there are about $400 million in federal dollars that we expect to flow through the department over the next several years. That includes the roughly $300 million through BCBB.
Okay, so it's the gross receipts is coming in from the utilities, and those are your revenues. There aren't you said you live within that, so there's not additional general fund support?
No general fund support. There was not usually there was a little bit of general fund support with clean heat standard positions. So that was at a point in time for a specific reason, but generally no general fund support for the department. There's other funds too. There's a little bit of energy efficiency utility EU funds. There are little bit of the nuclear compact funds that come through. So bill back for work the department does related to NDCAP. in our compact with Texas. What other funds am I missing, guys? There's special funds for build backs.
Right, so some billbacks in specific cases and dockets, like if we need to, those are largely done for when we hire a consultant and don't usually cover staff. We also have there's a fee on generation siting, like a per KW fee that is split between the department and the commission. I think it might be 60/40.
60/40, yeah, that's a good distinction. That those
60/40 department PUC.
yeah,
Correct.
for GRT and the net metering.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, Red
But
Bull.
only the gross receipt taxes on utilities, not the gross receipt taxes that come from such things as a business, I don't know, based gross receipts, but a constituent auto dealer. The tax goes up as his income goes up, so finally it's a bottom line that he notices other than.
Yeah, no, it's anybody that pays the gross receipts tax, and TJ can probably better articulate who all the entities are that pay that, but it's generally the utilities.
So the business gross receipts tax was not included in that revenue.
Right.
Oh, tell
I don't know.
General, yeah, like a mechanic or a general business does not.
Their
Well,
gross
I'm not sure
receipt
what they pay,
their
but
gross
it does not come to us.
So the gross receipt taxes go somewhere else.
Telecommunications too.
Yeah,
Right.
Utilities.
Right, you just tell, yeah,
Paid.
everything that's on the board.
GRT. Yep.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah. Sorry, Rep Sibilia and then Tori.
I am just wanting to get specific about who's paying. So it's and actually, rather than like try and do this here, can you guys provide us with a list of who is paying the gross receipts tax and how much they're paying, if it's a percentage, et cetera? And
Yes.
so I'm hearing utilities, but I would like some more specificity. So like the electric utilities, are the efficiency utilities paying? But could you give us
Well,
just a
give us
little bit
this.
more specificity about it? It'd be,
Well, and it is outlined in statute. I don't have the statutory reference memorized, but exactly the percentages are in statute.
so we could
So we-
review that.
Yes, it will provide you the reference as well, so.
Sure. Have you guys had to do have you been to a PROPS yet?
No.
So this could actually be a good preview. I don't know.
I was gonna say I was not prepared to come and talk about
Well,
our budget in depth, so.
Yes,
apologies for that, but-
I apologize about that. As I'm sure you guys know, but the budget presentation, that letter went out from, joint fiscal and the chair of approps and whenever it went out over the summer. And, requested new ways of presenting the budget information. And I know you guys are probably very familiar with that. And then we have been asked as policy committees to get a little bit deeper into understanding big picture budget stuff so that when we write our memos to approps, we basically can demonstrate that we've done some due diligence, that we understand the money coming in and out, and that we get a little bit to the meat of any changes. So obviously this is, not a big requested change, but I do want to ask a few more questions about it.
Sure.
But we've been specifically asked to, honestly, as policy committees, do a better job of understanding the recommendations that we're making to approps.
Yeah.
So, understanding how you guys are funded. I realized I didn't know.
So,
So,
and if we can, is it possible for you to provide us how much these utilities, that's gotta be public information, right? It's gotta be public information. It's funding government.
Well, I think.
Is there any kind of?
So we used to have a report that came out after we got all of the gross receipts tax, and the Supreme Court actually decided that those were tax
Confidential.
returns and confidential.
Okay.
So I don't want to just say yes. I'm not sure. I'm sure we could provide our total budget, of course, and how much comes from the gross receipts set, but from individual entities or
you roll it down as much as possible.
Yeah,
So, I mean, you know, if
yeah, we'll have our
electric utilities, it's X.
folks who
you
know those
that's
rules a little better, like as
Yeah.
far, we'll roll it out as far as we can.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm really interested in what all the sources of revenue that are coming in. It's been my understanding in past, I mean, that it's tight. And the PUC is tight. And there's some conflict around that. And we ask you guys to do a lot of things. So I think it's really helpful for us to understand where your revenue comes from,
Yes.
and what it looks like. Thank you, Chair.
Sure. And then, oh, I'm sorry, Tori.
Yeah, and my question was more about trends over time, like the electric sales are going up. So is your budget going up over time?
Yeah, I like most government departments and agencies, our budget is growing roughly 3.5%. But within the existing revenues and within the projected revenue collection from gross receipts tax, yes.
And then I was just looking over the description of the position.
Yeah, I can provide a little bit of context here.
Yeah.
This position, we haven't had a director of this division for a few years. Another director was kind of co-leading two divisions. We had a limited service position open up that allowed us to take a look at the division and the needs. And so we decided to reclassify that limited service position into a director level to help manage and oversee. And so that division does everything from contracts and grants administration to the financials and budgeting.
So the position has been, so the division has been co-led by another director for a couple of years. And you guys had, I'm sure I'm going to describe this improperly, but it sounded to me like you had an unfilled limited service position kind of hanging around. Did I misunderstand
It
that?
wasn't
And you
hanging-
decided to convert.
It was vacant. The individual had left, and once that individual left, I was able to take a look and be like, okay, are we going to fill that position as it is, or repurpose for the greater good of the division and the department? So it wasn't vacant for too long.
Gotcha.
Obviously, the reclassification takes a little bit of time and advertising. We actually had to advertise twice because, as I mentioned, it is limited service right now, and so that's why it's in that language is actually in the governor's recommended budget to convert the position from limited service to permanent. So,
Okay. Sorry, I just have one more before I lose my train of thought. And so does that raise the price tag a little bit? Like when you go from limited service to, is it
that conversion doesn't
$1,000 or something?
that conversion doesn't really make a difference, but obviously reclassifying it from the level and position that it was, elevating it, that obviously was a little bit of an increase.
Okay. Okay. Sorry. Go.
What was that position?
Before, the title was financial controls manager.
That's the position that was vacant, that you're not filling, or
Correct.
that
And now
the
it's
person left.
correct. And
and you're not
now,
filling.
right, and those functions will be part of the director's
Okay,
responsibilities.
great, thanks.
Okay. So we'll hear back. Do folks have any other questions? I'm just thinking of like, what do we need to know to write our budget memo?
Right, so the next one is one more item that you
Yeah.
should know for the memo. If
Okay.
folks don't have any other questions on the position.
I think I'm good. We might need to know, I mean, if it just costs like $10,000 more, what, like you said, it costs a little bit more.
Yeah, give you a bogey. Okay.
Send in,
Okay.
that would be great.
Yeah.
I just don't know what they're looking for this year. I want to make sure we're ready and that we do a good job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, I
Sorry.
believe the guidance from approach was to sort of understand why.
That's
For
right.
any of these requests, what is the goal? How is this going to help us serve Vermonters and those things? So
That's right.
kind of a word or two of why this is a good idea, because appropriations wants to know.
Yeah. Do you want me to send that along as well as go through it shortly?
Yeah.
Quickly now. Okay.
Oh, sorry. Where you going?
First of all, sorry for this late. And maybe you said this before, all these items on this memo, are you gonna assign dollar figures to them in essence. At some point to give us an idea of your impact on the budget.
I don't think they all
Yeah.
have dollars.
Well, some
Yeah.
may not, but
Right, yeah, I think obviously the position, we can give you a number on. The
Yeah.
next one is budget savings, and then the others do not have any budget implications.
okay, yeah, so it's that was just the.
Yep.
You underlined the savings on the.
Yeah,
And that's,
wanted to try to call that out so that,
Yep. we like to know that.
okay. Okay, great. Well, I'm gonna let Hunter talk about the reasons for doing this, but I will just say that the recommendation is that I'll start off. The recommendation is that we extend the renewal of the 10-year telecom plan update from 3 years to 5 years. Hunter can talk about the reasons why, but I will just mention in terms of the budget, we built our fiscal 27 budget on the assumption, perhaps hope that this would come to fruition. And so if this does not pass or come through, then we'll be needing to take a much closer look at our budget and where else we could potentially trim so that we can fund the update, which is roughly $500,000. So
It's on a per year basis or something.
on a per update
Per
basis.
update basis.
So we're in the going on the 3rd year, so we would have to do this update in fiscal 27.
Okay,
Otherwise we can do it 2 years from
Right,
now
right.
and budget for that.
Yeah, so we talked about this briefly, when Hunter was here. I think it's only the last 2 that have been contracted out. I think they used to be done in-house.
2 or 3, yeah.
Yeah, I think it was pretty laborious. I also think personally that there are a lot of work that needs to happen in the section of statute that directs the telecommunications spend. So I just, I'm wondering about has the department had the discussion about whether or not this is something to be done internally and decided that we should continue with contracting out?
I guess I'll let Hunter speak to that. I would just say we didn't get into the discussion whether it should be internal or external. It still costs money. And so if staff internally are doing it, then there's other work that just doesn't get done, or we have to hire somebody to do that work. So I think at the end of the day, it's still going to cost money, just who's doing the work. So from my perspective, it's more about timing. Do we need to do one? Is it necessary to do it every 3 years? Hunter can talk about the justifications for doing it every 5 years. And then, which made sense to me, asking to push it out a couple of years. And then that's the ability to save the department money and balance our budget for fiscal 27.
Does the department have any suggestions for cleanup on that language? Or are you guys satisfied with the language around the 10-year telecommunications plan?
I think we would probably have some recommendations for changes, but we didn't get into that in this session or with this ask.
Nor did we.
Well, I think if we're pushing it down the road, and it's
Yeah.
been a fairly contentious piece of statute. So
Yeah, I think there's certainly some cleanup that we had talked about, but narrowed our focus and asked for this year.
in the interest of moving on, I would just say that this legislator would be extremely interested in seeing any suggestions that you have or talking from them. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I can, per se, so I came into this role 2.5, maybe 2.5 years ago, this point, 3 years ago. And I came in as the 10-year plan. My leadership thought the RFP had been issued and awarded, and I came in and I found out that it had not even been issued yet. So I got into that sense of, there's been no discussion about moving it internally. I will say that it's a monumental amount of work that when we had hired a vendor to do it, the cost came out to about $450,000, and it would need a full-time employee, probably 2 solid years to do all the work and the associated work with the outreach, the public outreach, the engineering study, the statistically significant survey. Like, it's a lot of person hours that go into this plan, and it's some more person hours than we should say more employee. It would be nearly a full-time job for one thing to do this on a recurring basis, to do it at the level of granularity and detail that we've done it for at least the past 2 sessions. I know we talked about this, I think Tuesday, Wednesday, one of those days. And these are some notes on the rationale. I know I kind of glossed over it before, but first it's the budget rationale of every update is roughly $500,000. With the next next update due in fiscal year 27. We talked about the cellular deployment, and the completely new tower infrastructure is relatively small compared to the updates. The full 248A petitions for 23 and 24 for brand new full towers were in the single digits. Wireless technology has largely remained unchanged, with advances being evolutionary rather than revolutionary. In Vermont, the 5G deployments continue to be the prevailing work being done, and 6G is still a spec that's being written. It's not something that the industry is even starting to deploy, much less make equipment for. The mobile drive test that we conduct biannually shows the cellular improvements, and it's shown that it takes more than the 3-year cadence to actually see the improvements from the initial application for the petition for a new tower to getting it through the PUC process, to getting it constructed, to getting service spun up. That cadence is longer than the 3-year telecom plan. So we find that is another reason to bump it out to 5 years. With the rate at which towers are approved and constructed, it takes more than a 3-year cadence, and significant improvements are realized and able to be evaluated. The other on the horizon technologies that people seem to talk about a lot, like the direct cell to low Earth orbit satellite, as I mentioned, are still mostly an advertising campaign. They're not useful for day-to-day work. You can't actually make a telephone call to a low Earth orbit satellite. You can send a text on occasion. And the enterprise providers within the state, and I think you've heard a lot about this with the VCBB, have made huge strides in migration to fiber networks. This newer technology is expected to have a 30-year lifespan or more, and the changes to that technology are again going to be incremental, with improvements in bandwidth and electronic capacity underlying that fiber optic technology. We also largely defer to the VCBB and to that plan when it comes to fiber to the premises. So we're left again with the 10-year telecom plan, focusing primarily on wireless technology. The other pieces are the cost, and I just mentioned this, the cost and time taken to perform a statistically significant survey and corresponding engineering study are a large financial ask of the department. We often find similar responses on that 3-year cadence because there hasn't been a large change in the telecommunications landscape. And a 5-year cadence would allow those changes that do occur to be reflected in responses from the public. I bring up this statistically significant survey. I'll bring it up again because that's increasingly difficult to do, because that involves direct telephone outreach. Like, an internet survey is not considered statistically significant. Less and less people answer their cell phone now with a number they don't recognize. I will answer my work phone whenever it rings, but if my personal phone rings and I see a number I don't recognize, I hit mute and over. That particular piece is getting harder and harder to achieve because less and less people are answering the phones, seeing a decline in landline telephones and an increase in cellular phones, and less people are willing to pick up the number they don't recognize, because we all need to refinance our student loan or save 10% on our car insurance, which seems to be most of the stuff.
It's the Medicare.
Yeah.
Just curious, is that still a useful survey for you guys? Or once it does get statistically relevant?
I think the survey is extremely useful. I think the statistic significance is less useful. I think that if we used other mechanisms to collect this information, we would be able to get a better purview of what the public thinks, as opposed to relying on this telephone number survey.
And is that delineated in statute? That phraseology?
That statistically significance, I think it is. I know that the auditor has mentioned it before. So if it's not, we get called out if it's not statistically significant by
But
that.
it doesn't dictate that it has to be a phone, because there's other ways to achieve that statistically significant without just a phone.
Right, but phone's a primary method because, like I said, the internet communication is not considered a good enough surveying methodology. That's the piece I have on the 10-year telecom plan. And the other piece was, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Or are you moving on to a different one? Because I have a question about this.
Yep, that's right. I apologize. Yep.
Okay, cool. So you built the $500,000 savings into your budget already for FY27. So if this change doesn't make it across the finish line, what will you cut or what work won't get done if you have to cut $500,000 out of your budget to pay for this?
Yeah, that's a good question. We also, what we do have budgeted is a $500,000 comprehensive energy plan, which happens every 6 years that TJ and his team do. I would say we would probably need to look at cutting down the costs of those plans, what that specifically looks like. We can follow up on. I would also say it depends a little bit on a few other factors, staffing, whether or not we're able to fill vacancies, if we have more vacancy savings. And it also depends on federal funding. We've had some wrenches thrown in to certain things, some of our federal funding dollars, and plans being approved, or caps on rates that we can plan into the federal budget that we've received, the SEP budget, which you probably heard Melissa Bailey talk about. So there's a lot of moving pieces and things that could change over time. And so what that ultimately looks like in 6 months could look different than today, but those are a few of the levers that we would be looking at.
But the comprehensive energy plan, that's required work, right?
It is.
So how would you realize savings there? I don't understand.
So that money is would be allocated to in two broad categories: public engagement on it, and leading up to it in particular, and technical analysis in certain areas, whether it's something we want to evaluate the electric grid, or more broadly related to energy usage, reliability, affordability, et cetera, and that engagement on that technical analysis. So that's what costs. So, that's what a lot of that money is allocated to. And so we would evaluate whether we can really do those technical analyses, which we're considering now. Where that plan is due in January of 2028. So a lot of those analyses would happen in fiscal year 27. So and the engagement, and so that's why we're kind of planning for it now. And we would have to reevaluate, given all the other uncertainties, what we can continue to do. How much engagement do we do? Lots of focus groups, like we did in our last successful engagement. Or do we need to pull some of that back and do different sorts of engagement?
Yeah, I would not be in favor of that happening. And I think the chair's question is a fair question. And I just want to come back to something that I had said earlier around the telecommunications plan. So you're asking. It feels a little bit like we're just kind of kicking a problem down the road, as opposed to with the telecommunications plan, as opposed to potentially like how much of this do we need? And should we kind of shrink the obligation there? Which, again, I would say I would really welcome suggestions from the department about the statutory language there, maybe to accompany this notion of maybe we just don't need to do this as often. So both pieces would be helpful for me.
That's good to know.
Yeah, and definitely not looking for us to shortchange the comprehensive energy plan in this moment.
Correct.
But I'm curious on the flip side, whether you guys had conversations around taking the safe bet and putting it in your budget. What I'm just curious to know about the decision to.
Well, there's only so many dollars and revenue to be collected. So we've had a little bit more pressure over the last year and a half on the budget because of some federal changes. We've had to cover some staffing costs that we were hoping to have covered by Solar for All that we're now paying for gross receipts tax. Frankly, my position is an increase on the department. There wasn't a deputy for several years, and so my position is an impact. And so there's just been additional pressures on gross receipts tax. It's not all that different from, the other departments and agencies that have kind of base pressures in fee for space and staffing, salary costs. Like we have all those same pressures too. It just happens to be funded with gross receipts tax. So there was just in order to live within our means of the revenues we collect. That was what we were hoping for in terms of budget for fiscal 27.
Is the gross receipts tax then above the line in the, in a utility, net revenue requirements?
Sure.
Meaning that ratepayers pay for it.
Ratepayers pay it, what we used to call above the line.
Right.
And so the gross receipts tax then has an impact of effectively increasing the amount of revenue that is required, usually known as being raised through rates on the kilowatt hour basis for a utility or.
That's correct. That the gross receipt tax goes to the formation of electric rate.
Okay, do folks have more questions about the things of the telecom plan?
Would we still get the information that you need to determine outcomes for whatever programs you want to do or whatever legislation you want to do, that sort of thing?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah. We're still able to collect that information. We get that regardless of the dates those can be covered. That's data that we go back.
Okay, I don't know how you pronounce the acronym. Do we call it PCAB?
PCAB.
Okay, PCAB.
So, again, I think I mentioned this Tuesday. The second piece is smaller, and that is disbanding the Telecommunications and Connectivity Advisory Board, TCAB. The TCAB was established in 2015 and charged with making recommendations regarding telecommunication responsibilities. It was primarily dedicated to the expansion of wired internet services to all addresses across the state. Act 71 created the VCBB, and the purpose of the VCBB is to fund and support those policies that are designed to get wired internet services to every address in the state. So it's kind of redundant in that regard. We've only met twice since 2021, I think once since 2024, and that was at our behest after we tracked them all down and sent them enough emails to begrudgingly get them together. When we do the annual report, we reach out to the chair of the TCAB, and every year we ask him what his thoughts on the annual report are. And he says, we think that you should disband the TCAB. So given their primary mission has been supplanted by the VCBB, and the control of the connectivity fund that they used to get has been given to the VCBB, we find that it's redundant. It's just a nice piece of work and an extra piece of communication and outreach we do to a party that is starting to not really engage.
I do not have questions on that. Yep, Rep. Sabili?
Just around language, has any language been developed on this? I noted that there's no bill, you have language on this.
We have language for all of these requests ready to go if the committee would be willing to take them.
Herbs.
I actually hadn't heard that.
no,
Should be.
Yeah, it's fine. Do you want to do the last
Give it a
one?
shot.
Do you want to do the last one first before we have to go?
That would be great. I mean, if you all don't mind, I'm gonna jump to number 6. I have a doctor's appointment I need to jump on.
It's okay.
At 3
Sorry,
o'clock.
Wendy.
No, that's okay.
Do you not know how to budget your time when you come to our committee?
Sorry.
She doesn't have a mug yet.
I know, she does not have a mug yet. You have a mug, right? Oh, you guys.
Yeah, I think.
All right, just don't leave without a little gift being bestowed. Sorry, not a gift,
Um,
a
Gotcha.
token of respect, token of participation.
I love
Participation.
Participation trophy.
That's my favorite.
Okay, on we go.
Sorry, jump into number 6 really quickly, and I don't have a whole lot here. But building energy code safe harbor language, this was a request by the Builders Association because of the governor's executive order on housing, which said builders and homeowners can choose between the 2 codes. And then some questioning, uncertainty around the legality of that. And the department is moving forward with rulemaking to solidify that, but there's this a little bit of a gray area. And so builders and homeowners and others are asking for safe harbor language to be held harmless if they did in fact build to 2020 codes after the EO, but before the rules are adopted. And so that's that's number 6 here that we would also like to ask the committee for their consideration on. And I'm sure if more testimony is required, I'm happy to either come back or for Andrew Brewer with builders would be happy to kind of answer questions that he's hearing from.
We'll be taking that to my compliance goal that I have, and that this will probably be easy to add to. So actually, if you have language on it, that would be great to have sooner rather than later.
Okay. So, yeah, I don't have questions on that I wouldn't want to really dive into, so. On we go.
Right. So I guess I'm up on integrated resource plans. So I'm not sure I can get there with that. Using the acronym, but yeah, we'll work on that.
You don't have to. Yeah.
So the goal of this just broadly is to update the integrated resource plan statute to increase our regulatory efficiency and then enhance outcomes on integrated resource plans. And so just as a reminder, they're really a utility's opportunity to transparently articulate their decision-making framework. That's what gets approved by the Public Utility Commission, is their decision-making framework. Kind of sets a foundation for their actions for the next 10 to 20 years. They do these by every 3 years. They're governed by statute now, the least cost planning statute, and they have to be consistent with the energy plan. They're, like I said, they're required to be submitted every 3 years, and they're really a significant piece of work that they take between 12 and 18 months to do. So, if they're submitted and then it takes some time in a regulatory process to get them approved, they're going to really gets one approved and really just starting to, they immediately have to start their next one. So our proposal is to make some improvements to the IRP statute to modify the requirement to just for municipal and cooperative utilities in particular. This would not, as we propose it, apply to Green Mountain Power or Vermont Gas. from every 3 years to be every 5 years. With that to have an interim status report that is not intended to be a mini integrated resource plan, but more of a check in on the actions identified in the IRP, how they're going, if there's any changes to the decision-making framework of a utility, change in leadership may change their framework, or change in industry trends may identify other issues. So that status report is kind of important to not go too long, but not also have to do a full 18-month or longer process on integrated resource plans.
Why not GMP or VT gas?
Largely because they are investor-owned utilities that, and they're bigger, and we feel like it's important to continue to have that updated, particularly because they're investor-owned utilities and they have a different governance structure than our municipals and cooperatives who are governed by electric commissions, the municipalities or their own members.
Rep. Morrow and then Hedi.
Can you just comment on this change vis-a-vis oversight of these utilities in light of Commissioner's testimony a couple weeks ago and recent happenings, in Hyde Park? But so just this distinct from annual oversight processes, or how do they relate?
It is distinct from that, and thank you for calling that out. So this is higher level. Think of planning for meeting our renewable and maybe clean energy requirements, and how we want to plan for resilience of our grid, and ensuring that there's cost-effective investments in service quality, and making sure that they're reviewing the resources available to them in kind of the operations and delivery of service. So there is a financial component of that. They do some financial outlooks in that, but it would not. IRPs are not a substitute for that more detailed annual look of those questions that we want to really make a formal process of for all our utilities.
So that was part of my questions. That was helpful. But I'm just, I need it maybe broken down a little more simply, TJ. It seems counterintuitive to me that the two larger investor-owned would be at a faster cadence than the smaller munis and co-ops. And I just don't understand. Can you just break it down a little bit more simply about why that recommendation is in the best interest of a resilient grid? Maybe that's.
Yeah, I think it's really it just speaks to the governance structure where investor-owned utilities, we don't really, it's not the department, but as a state, we kind of don't say that investor-owned utilities have a profit motive.
Right.
Right. Mm-hmm. And so having that more regular cadence, or not extending or changing the cadence here for those utilities made sense to us, given that the governance structure, and that they, municipals and co-ops don't have that profit motive. They have their other oversight, and we think that IRPs are really important for that planning framework and analysis and ability to transparently collaborate. But for those utilities, they're in a continual cycle of planning. Those investor-owned utilities are also able to move a little more nimbly with their planning and have more resources available. So I think that the lift is not quite as big for them.
And so, thank you. That's helpful. I, as you know, always think about the rural areas. And so GMP has a lot of rural territory, as do our co-ops. And so can you just reassure me on this? So, we need those areas hardened and resilient and really thinking, and we know that WEC, it's pretty expensive. So, can you just reassure me a bit with the co-ops in particular about why this makes sense?
Well, one of the other changes which I didn't
Yeah, I would say to talk about this, I think it helps.
articulate yet, or two other changes. One, in the least cost planning statute, we talk about things like affordability and environmental compliance, and we specifically want to add the words resilience and reliability to that least cost planning framework. So that's on our mind also, to make sure. I think in practice, those things are being put into their IRPs now, but making it explicit there. We also we require the Department of Public Service publishes with its comprehensive energy plan and then updates in the interim guidance for integrated resource plans that really it shows utilities, meant to articulate to utilities how we are going to review those plans, and that guidance really has in the last several years pushed more towards those types of resilience investments. We want to ensure that utilities are making and planning for the risks and vulnerabilities that they see coming on the system. What we are proposing to do with this language is, I spoke the other day about municipals and co-ops they can come in for a 3% rate increase every year with a streamlined regulatory process. We had suggested in here that we want to tie the ability to get that streamlined increase to having an approved IRP. So right now, IRPs, a utility submits the requirement in statutes for the utility to submit an IRP, and the Public Utility Commission may approve an IRP. So they don't have to, utilities actually don't have to have an approved IRP. Unless they want certain things. And so the way that was a hook historically was, well, in a 248 proceeding, when they're citing infrastructure, then a utility comes in for a 248 certificate of public good. They need to show consistency with their approved IRP. But utilities aren't coming in for those infrastructure upgrades anymore. The people who propose, utility scale projects are developers. And so that hook is that connection is broken. And so we want to have that hook for their streamlined rate increases, which is, as I understand it, I think if you talk with VIPSA in particular, you'll hear that that has been a really useful tool to increase their regulatory efficiency and help stabilize more predictable rate path. And so that's the other way that we're tying that to that, so that they ensure that we have these IRPs. Okay, you want regular rate increases, we need to make sure you're making these investments and have and tie it back to resilience. So really long-winded, that can be, I'm sorry, but
no, that's okay, it's helpful. But I think what I'm hearing is we're not always getting the IRPs because they don't necessarily have to do it. And so this isn't, is that right?
So all utilities have been filing IRPs, but there has been long and drawn out processes about our guidance and whether we're following the guidance. And then what generally happens with an integrated resource plan is that they either have followed the guidance and put everything in the IRP, which is great, or if there's a miss, they either update the IRP or we enter an agreement with the utility that there's this piece or a piece of work that needs to be done for any other investment decisions. So their decision-making framework, well, you didn't actually talk about peak management and how that could maybe avoid a distribution constraint. I'm making up an example here, but and so we would say, okay, we can approve your IRP as long as you agree that if you're evaluating an infrastructure investment, you will analyze like how load management may avoid the peak, and you'll do that, and you'll put it in your next IRP. And so it's like those discussions are like not easy and drawn out. They take a lot of time for us. They take a lot of time for the utility, and we think that these proposed changes will help to streamline that.
Rep Southwood.
So is it fair to say that the IRP, when it's approved, they may not see the full results of the IRP plan in time for them to start doing it again, or to implement any aspects of that IRP?
Yeah, I think that is definitely true. That's what I was saying with, this, it takes 12 to 18 months. And then, there's some IRP cases after they filed, it's taken over a year. It's taken almost 2 years in one utility's case to get approval with interveners and just different process that has happened. And so, without further extensions, they actually need to start again before they even know if their other one is approved.
So it would give the utilities a better sense of how it worked, and also Department of Public Service an idea of how it worked.
Right.
Or they have to
I think it'll clarify that kind of timing again. Yeah. There's one other technical piece to this that actually we're in talking with a municipal utility. This is kind of a technical fix. I just want to mention it here. Is that municipal utilities are allowed to implement innovative pilots, and so they can implement a pilot tariff for 18 months. But what happens after the 18 months is then they need to either stop the pilot. It didn't work, but if it's successful, then they need to stop the pilot and turn it into a tariff. And so there's just a timing issue there. And so we put in language to say, if you're filing for a tariff and there's a time frame in there, if you file for a tariff, then the innovative 18-month pilot can continue until the tariff, if and when the tariff is approved, just so there's no stop-start program issues or having, potentially 3 different versions of the tariff as you go forward.
Just a context.
It's really a technical fix on that one.
Really short. So how long typically does the tariff case take?
It depends. So a utility files a tariff, and the department then has 30 days to comment and request, or any party can request an investigation within 30 days. If we do not investigation, then often they get approved within another 30 to 60 days. If we do request an investigation, it can take up to 7 months, and that's
2 to 7 months.
Yeah.
Thanks.
That would have been a simpler way to answer that.
No, that's great. I appreciate the detail.
Changes to Act 174.
Right. So Act 174 of 2016, we should clarify.
Yes.
It's probably been Act 174 since then. That act established a process for regional planning commissions to develop energy plans and obtain a determination from the department that the plans align with the energy plan and guidelines that we publish pursuant to that energy plan, and receive substantial deference in energy facility siting decisions before the Public Utility Commission. So if a regional planning commission can then approve a town's plan, if the town has that plan, and they go to the PUC and say, we either like this project where it's cited, or this project is not consistent with our town plan, the PUC gives the town substantial deference to say, yeah, you were adequately planning for your energy future, and you said, no solar or wind turbine or natural gas in this area, and we're going to defer to you. And so that's the purpose of Act 174. Last year, Act 181 made some changes to the Land Use Review Board's process that had implications on the Act 174 process. And so this is really an administrative fix to ensure towns and municipalities don't have gaps in having an approved energy plan, and it helps them maintain their ability to receive substantial deference. So now, after Act 181, a RPC municipality must get a plan approved by the Land Use Review Board process. Blurb, acronym. And then they get a determination from the Public Service Department. So that creates like a vulnerable time where there's not an approved plan and not an official receipt of substantial deference. And so the proposal is to fix that. It also kind of streamlines public feedback by consolidating it with the adoption of the broader regional or town plans. Often we have a regional plan adoption, and then we have to go and hold a separate public hearing on a portion of the regional plan that's already been adopted, the energy plan portion. And I've been to a half dozen of these in the last year, I think. And there's been, I think, one total participant in a half dozen of these hearings. And a lot of that is because they've already had a public process with their regional plan. It also would help us in terms of there's kind of currently we need to review basically plans 2 different times and submit comments separately to the Land Use Review Board. So really just streamlining that whole process is the proposal. Stop there and see if questions. Oh, one other thing, I won't stop there, sorry. Just we have talked with the Land Use Review Board on this, and the RPCs, and they're both supportive of this streamlining.
Quick, if I have a question, that's the streamlining part of it. How, can you explain a little bit better how you think that would work? The town wants to update its energy plan, or maybe wants to create an energy plan that maybe doesn't have one that achieves has been approved by the regional planning commission and by public service, so they don't have substantial deference. So if they want to create an energy plan that does achieve that, how would that be streamlined with in this conception?
Right. So I think the issue is that under Act 181, the regions and towns need to go through a land use review board process for the plans. And so once they go through that process, they then have a newly adopted regional plan. And it's actually the inverse. Is if their energy plan hasn't changed, for instance, then they have a new regional plan, but we're required to then go through our process again because it was newly adopted by the region, and there's a break until we are able to have our public hearing and review again, which can happen quickly. I mean, if they haven't changed it, but then if they haven't changed it and the data is really old, it creates another issue of where, well, maybe you're not using current enough data to we may have questions as well. And so if we do it all at once with the concept, so that I think the real issue is not in the scenario you brought up, it's in the inverse of if they don't change their plan.
Okay, so if the region would update its plan in order to approved by the lawyer based on Act 181, and having updated that plan, now the municipal energy plan is stale, and we need to be refreshed and reapproved by the RPC. Is that
so once it gets through the Act 181 process, they have updated their regional plan, but then we need to then ensure that it met our guidelines. And so we have to then have
Under
a
174.
subsequent
Under one
of
seventy.
174.
Yeah.
And so once they update under 181, they no longer,
Get substantial difference.
right, there's a risk of that. I mean, we would see how it played out in front
Yeah.
of the commission, but that's the risk. And we have to do a whole separate public hearing and process around it where we
Okay.
could do it all at once if the,
Great, that helps. Thank you.
yeah.
Um. I think you said this. Sorry, when's the next, remind me the timeline of comprehensive energy plan, when?
January 2028 is when it will be published. And so we would expect a draft several months before that, in the fall of 2027. And we expect to actually have we do have a requirement to issue a public engagement plan at least a year before, so sometime in 2026 for it. We're expecting to do that this spring.
And I'll find that in statute. I'm just curious to see what the requirements are for that.
For the energy plan?
Yeah.
Public engagement,
All of it.
202B, I believe.
Okay,
It's either 202A or B.
okay. So the public engagement plan is going to be published, no, sorry, say it one more time.
This spring, in the spring.
This spring, then the draft is published in fall 2027 with public comments, I'm sure, and then it's finished in January 2028.
And the public engagement plan will outline the engagement before the draft. We expect a lot of engagement
Right,
helping us to build the policies.
okay.
Do you want us to weigh in too?
Absolutely.
Uh,
The legislature or you personally?
All right. Yeah, well, let's do one last question and then. go ahead.
My question's back on the IRP ones. Does the PUC have weigh in on this idea?
On the, we have not, we have not connected with them on the specifics of these changes.
Me?
I do think you should ask them and, about it. Yes. We will also be connected with them.
I figured you.
So the
Yeah.
herbs that you called in,
Yes, the herbs.
aren't they a commission requirement and not a Department of Public Service requirement?
Right. The commission is the one, well, they're a requirement of the utilities to file them with the commission, and the commission may approve them. Yes.
So if we go to a 5-year cycle on the munis and the co-ops, they would be deemed to have a valid IRP from, they make a submittal, due say June 30th of 1 year, takes you anywhere up to 18 months to approve it. They would be deemed to have a valid IRP upon submittal of an IRP, whether or not it's been approved, so they can get these. You did mention the 4% increase in, you went from 3% to 4% in that
Thank you.
applying. And but if you go to 4% and you had a 10, you still have a 10% you can apply for increases up to 3% at a time, up to 10% since the last rate increase. Would there be any increment in that going from 4% to raise that 10% to 12%?
So the two questions there. The first one, a utility would need to have an approved IRP. Their last approved IRP would set the time to 5 years. So if they had one approved a year ago, then they would need to do one in
So they have 5 years from that approval date,
right.
not the submission date, but the approval date for the IRP. And then you have this 4%, the 3% to 4%. And then my question on the 4% is raising the 10% limit to something,
Yes.
greater, like a 12% or
Right.
some number that you people.
Thank you for the question because I overlooked that point in here in describing it. When I mentioned the 3% rate increase, we were also proposing to up that to 4%. And so, and the other part that's not written in what we filed is that we would increase, there's a cumulative requirement that those three, right now it's 3%, and then if you get it to over 10%, then you need to have a full rate increase, and we're proposing to change it to 4 and 15. So
Only 3%. I only said 12.
yeah.
All right. Thank you so much for your time. Appreciate you guys coming in. Let's see, we are looking for the info about the gross receipts tax. At whatever level of transparency or opacity you can provide. And then, if you have legislative language,
Brittany made a note, send language.
great. Yep. And I just, we're not a quick committee. So, but yeah, please send it along. And thanks for presenting all these requests. And I think that we can go offline. And we're done for the day.